What is going on, everyone? Taylor here from OA Cheddar, and in this episode of our bi-weekly call, we are talking to the Amazon lawyer himself, Jeff Schick. Now, if you have been in any type of Amazon seller community and you've seen anyone talking about or asking about IP complaints, you have probably seen Jeff's name come up. He is very popular and very well known in the Amazon community because he helps Amazon sellers navigate through the murky waters that is IP complaints, account suspension. What does it mean to get a trademark IP complaint compared to a counterfeit? All those questions are going to be answered in this video and much more, including things like what should I do when I get a Voorhees letter or a certified mail to my doorstep from a brand itself? Should I throw it away? Should I take it more seriously? We dive into that into this episode, as well as some of the things that you can be doing to protect yourself from account suspension or any type of legal issues as an Amazon seller. Jeff and his team have put together a fantastic offer for Amazon sellers. For only $89 a month, you can keep Jeff and his team on retainer to help you and represent you when it comes to things like IP complaints, suspected IP complaints, counterfeit claims, or even certified mail. Basically, anything that is in your account health section of your seller central account, Jeff and his team will be there to help you with it. I can't stress this enough, guys. $89 a month is a huge value for everything that you're getting. Having good legal representation is critical as an Amazon seller, because when you get an IP complaint, you don't have to guess at what you should do next. You can go to a professional and get solid advice and help. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoy this interview. I hope you get as much out of it as we did hosting the interview. For more information about OA Cheddar or Jeff and his team, check out the links below in the description. If you like this channel and like what you're hearing, hit subscribe and the like button. Other than that, enjoy the interview and have a great day. Welcome, everyone, to another OA Cheddar show. We are very pleased to be joined by our special guest, Jeff Schick. We are also joined by my brother, Grant Dunn, one of the co-owners of OA Cheddar. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Just hanging with you guys for the next hour or so. So it should be fun.
Perfect. We're really excited to get into it. You know, IP complaints have always been a hot button topic for Amazon sellers, especially for newer sellers who are getting started. So I'm really excited to dive into that. But before we do, I want to bring our attention real quick to a sale that we are running on OA Cheddar. So let me share my screen here for a second. So right now, guys, we are running our Easter sale for our lead list. If you go to oacheddar.com and just go ahead and select the See lead list plans, it'll bring you down to this section here where you can learn all the information of our lead list and the different types that we offer. And if you want, you just go ahead and come in here, select to your list. This is a buy one, get one free sale for your first month. So if you come in here, you put 2 lists into your checkout, and you just type in the code BOGO first and apply, you will see that price get cut in half, which covers the first month of your free subscription on your second list. You do need to add 2 lists to your checkout for this code to apply. Again, that is BOGO first. That is running until April 10th. After that, it will go away. So limited seats available. So go ahead and jump on that when you have a moment. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, again, guys, we're joined by Jeff Schick. Jeff, you are, man, if I would say, if ever I see anyone have a conversation or question about IP complaints on whether it's our Facebook group or chat or another group, your name comes up quite a bit, like all the time, right? Call Jeff Schick. He's the Amazon lawyer. Get him on the phone. He'll get you guys taken care of. That kind of stuff is what we see all the time. Let me ask you, just to get started off, how did you find yourself being kind of that go-to Amazon lawyer that everyone seems to work with and trust and have great results with?
Oh, God, that's a great question. Well, I guess so. To know that, I guess you have to go back to 2011, which I was in college and I was buying textbooks from Amazon. And I was sitting at my mom's a veterinarian. I was sitting at her office and I was in the treatment room and I was going to buy textbooks from Amazon.com, and it popped up on the screen. It said, have you ever wanted to sell on Amazon? And it said, sign up for 6 months free as a seller. You just only pay, whatever you sell. You don't pay the $40 a month. And so I looked at that and I was like, that sounds interesting. And my mom goes, hey, if you want to sell anything on the shelf here, see what sells. And I was like, none of this stuff's going to sell. Being this typical cynical self, because it wasn't my idea, so of course it wasn't going to be good. So so I went ahead and signed up, and I was like, you know what, I'll take some of this shampoo over here because no one's going to ever buy shampoo. I'll prove it wrong, right? So I put some pet shampoo up online, and lo and behold, I merchant fulfilled 12 bottles at a loss of $5 a bottle. So I paid for the privilege of selling on Amazon at negative $60 for the first case that sold within about a day. And I was like, okay, clearly I didn't understand pricing, but this is easily fixed. All we have to do is just go in and raise our price. And then I'll prove my mom wrong because it won't be profitable, right? We won't be profitable, but we won't sell anything because no one's going to pay if it's a discount. And so I go in and I put it up, and now we put it from like $15 a bottle to 30 something dollars a bottle. And all 12 bottles sell the next day. I'm like, okay, well, now this is proving me wrong. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So then we start merchant fulfilling, and we're just selling stuff slowly but surely, averaging about 10 bottles a day. And then Amazon says, hey, would you like to try this beta for FBA? And we're like, what is that? And my mom's first thing is she goes, oh my gosh, if we send all this to Amazon, who's going to pay to ship it back if it doesn't sell? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess we will. It's Amazon. They're not going to do it for free. Right. So we send it all in. And we send them 3 cases, and the next day 3 cases sell in one day, and that's 36 bottles. And we're like, what? How did that just happen? And so we just started sending more and more in, and so slowly but surely we built it up. And by the time I was in law school, we were selling 100,000 bottles a year. Wow. And so we were shipping about 2,300 bottles to Amazon a week, on average, and it was 2.5 million a year. Jeez. So it was fun. I mean, I loved it. I had, just a never ending supply of Amex points. What is she saying? ASIN or cap? What do you mean by cap?
Like that's like a lie, or not true. That's Chris, that is some Gen Z language right there. I love it.
Oh, I don't have TikTok. I don't want China monitoring my phone, but that's a whole nother conspiracy theory to go down. So long story short, we were selling a ton, and then I started having issues on Amazon. And so I first reached out to one of my law school professors, and he helped me understand what a Voorhees letter was and how to interpret it and what to do about it. And then I had a suspension happen. Didn't have any lawyers able to help me with that. And then I finally found a lawyer, hired him, and then realized I was like, God, I can't believe I just spent $3,000 on this on this appeal. I could do a better job than this. And I just, that's how I got into it. And so I graduated law school, started my firm, and started working, helping sellers. I think my first client, hired me the day I passed the bar to help with the suspension. So it was, it's been, so I've been doing this, a really long time. And I love what I do. So it's a lot of fun, and it's really enjoyable.
That's awesome. And you've helped out so many people over the years. You've helped us out with IP complaints and when we had our suspension and stuff. And so I love the story how, you start off, you're going to college, you find out what Amazon is, you're selling on it. And then lo and behold, you graduate law school, and now you're in it, you're in it, you're the Amazon guy, Right. Well, that's fantastic, man. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go in and just dive in and ask some questions. And guys who are watching live, please feel free to ask any question that you would like. We will get to them and field them. I do have some questions that me and Grant were discussing and thought would be good to ask, but please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. So one of my first questions I have would be, what should a seller do if they get an IP complaint? They get their first one and they're going, what the heck is this? What does this email mean? What do I do?
So I can tell you the first thing you want to not do, which is do not call account health support and let them talk you through acknowledging the violation. So there's this misconception that people have that they think that they can acknowledge the violation, and it'll take it off the dashboard, and then that means all is well and good with the universe, which it works like the first time or so. A couple of times you'll get through it, you'll acknowledge it, and it'll be fine. They'll disappear. But what they don't tell you is that if you acknowledge too many times, they'll take away the ability to acknowledge. So we had this happen with one of my clients that I've been working with for 3 years. He had like 5 IP complaints build up over the last 6 months. Meant to send them my way, but forgot to send them to me. And then got that dreaded, I guess, well, first off, he called account health and they had him acknowledge 2 of them. So he's down to 3. And and he'd acknowledged 2. Then he gets 3 more. And so this happened a couple of weeks ago. He calls me up. I'm sitting in the hospital because I'd had some issues. And so I was in the hospital. I had an IV hooked up to my arm. They're taking 8 vials of blood. And he's telling me that he's just gotten a 72-hour notice and wants to know what to do. And I'm like, well, lucky for you, I'm not able to move and I can't do anything, but I'm right-handed. This is in my left arm. So, and I brought my laptop with me because I thought I'd be there for a while. So I'm like, looks like I'm going to log into your account and see what I can do here. So he was at a score of 98, which anything below 100 is at risk of suspension. So he needed 2 points to get above 100 and prevent the suspension. Easy enough. That means just, 1 IP claim to be removed. So we go on. I tell him, I say, this is not what I normally recommend. I'm like, but the fastest way to get this above 100 is to acknowledge one of the violations, and then we'll deal with the rest of them. He goes, sure, acknowledge it. So we go in and we click acknowledge, and they come back within 10 seconds. They come back and they say, we cannot accept your acknowledgement because you've acknowledged too many violations in the past. So now he comes back, he goes, okay, what do we do now? I'm like, well, lucky for you, I actually know one of the people that filed this IP complaint for this other one against you. I'm going to reach out to them and ask them for a Friday at 4 p.m. favor to retract the claim. So I reached out. They retracted it. He got to like 102. And so he's safe, right? So now I'm like, okay, and the rest of these we're going to handle through our normal process. And I'm sitting in the hospital, so my paralegal is going to take the rest of them. But yeah, it just goes to show that acknowledging them is not a good option, because when you really need to acknowledge them, like when you're under 72-hour notice, they might not like it. So so that's what you don't do, is acknowledge.
Yeah, so, kind of like if hopefully no one ever does this, but if you commit a crime, keep your mouth shut. All right. if the cops pull you over and ask you questions, don't say anything.
Right.
It's something
the one
learn the
time
hard
it's
way.
ethical to lie if a cop has pulled you over and asking you a question that
I respectfully decline to answer.
There you go. Okay.
That's that is the correct terminology. Yes, I invoked my 5th Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Yeah.
So that would be the example of what not to do. Now, what to do? First off, gather your facts. Figure out, one, is there any merit behind this? So, like, for instance, if we look at the IP claim and see that you were selling, like it's a bottle of Kirkland Signature water is what you're selling, but the listing says that it was Perrier. Well, that's a problem, right? Because we are on the wrong brand at that point. So that means that there is some truth to this IP claim. Is it counterfeit? Probably not, but there may be some truth to it. So we want to collect the facts. Similarly, if it's like a branded bundle that you're on, and you've listed your Tide Pods on somebody else's branded bundle listing, that there might be something to it there as well. So we don't. So that's why we always tell people, collect your documents, get them in order, and then send them to us, and then we can at least handle it and make sure that everything's right. And if it is, we'll reach out to the rights owner, get it retracted. If we can't retract it, then submit the appeal. We want to make sure everything's right before we start submitting appeals, because one thing Amazon does use the appeal process for is fact finding. And so if you give them an invoice that says, well, you're accused of selling, let's say you're accused of selling counterfeit, tires, and you like bicycle tires, and you provide them a Walmart third-party receipt that says you bought from Guangdong, Shanghai, bicycle company, they're probably counterfeit. And so that's going to be used against you. So not only are they not going to accept that appeal, there's a chance that they could suspend you further for it, because now they might change it from a no impact or a low impact violation to a high impact or a critical impact violation, because you've given them the evidence that you did sell something counterfeit or potentially counterfeit.
So making sure that you're protecting your documents, or that you have them, that you stay organized, keep track of what you're selling. One thing that when we were doing our own shipping and before we moved to our prep center, we were very diligent about making sure we not only saved every packing slip, but We had all of the, order confirmations, saved or easily accessible. We even took pictures of our inventory when it was coming out of the box with UPC, without UPC. And, when we were working with you, I remember when, as of now, my sister actually will work with Jeff in his office more often now, but we were sending pictures, and I think I remember you telling me like, hey, pictures don't, send me whatever you can, but do pictures and things like that do help. Like, what documentation, when you say get your documents ready, would you say a seller needs to be collecting?
So for online arbitrage, that means your order confirmation email, shipping confirmation email, and then pictures are definitely helpful now. Amazon actually added a place where you can upload pictures of the product if you get nice. An IP claim. Yes, it's actually helpful. There's like a designated place to upload it. So pictures of the product definitely can be helpful. They're not crucial, right? Like, it's not a picture of a product with a bad receipt. It's not gonna overcome a bad receipt. And right. A great receipt can overcome the lack of a picture. But together, it's always, there's strength in numbers. The more you have, the better it is. And if you're using a prep center, bridge the gap. So like, if your account is based in Washington and your prep center is in Montana, when they get your shipping confirmation, your order confirmation email, and it says that it was shipped to Montana, the person at Amazon's gonna be like, I don't understand. Like, because on their screen, it actually tells them this seller is located in Washington. So they're going to immediately be like, Montana, none of this makes sense. Why? So they'll probably reject it, to be quite honest, because they're not going to invest the time to figure it out from there. So when I say bridge the gap, one great thing about using the Amazon workflow for shipping to them is that you're going to have a ship from location. So if you shipped, 5 ink cartridges from Montana to FBA in, San Bernardino, California, get that shipping, get that order and print, save it as a PDF and attach it. So now they have the order confirmation showing that you bought it, the shipping confirmation showing it was shipped to Montana, and then the shipping to Amazon confirmation showing that it was shipped from Montana to FBA, and here's the shipment number. And now they can connect all the dots and not have any questions, because questions equal rejection in Amazon's eyes.
That's so good. It's so good. And that's also so very true. Questions equal rejections. 100%. Well,
so
awesome.
Jeff, so Jeff, you mentioned that the seller, I think you said the seller central workflow. I just want to clarify, that still works if you're using like an Amazon shipping or an inventory lab shipping workflow, right? Like, it's still going to have the ship from address the same. It's not like,
you should be able, and you should be able to pull. I mean, I wouldn't pull it from inventory labs per se, just because they're not going to know what it is. I would pull it from Amazon, because my understanding is that inventory labs creates it in Amazon for you, but it just handles it on their own platform. So you should still be able to go to Amazon and take a PDF of it where it's got the the URL showing sellercentral.amazon.com and all that stuff.
Cool. I just wanted to clarify that in case there's any new sellers that are watching and you're like, wait, what? I'm using inventory lab. Is it still going to work? I have a question for you. There's a lot, the account health has a whole slew of different types of claims and warnings that you can get. Obviously, and thankfully, Amazon's gotten better at like actually telling us and showing us, well, these are claims that are high priority, and these are claims that are not so high a priority, which helps us, divert our focus. But can you kind of speak on that, the different types of claims that you can get and the ones that are the most at risk for your account, and kind of build into that a little bit?
Absolutely. So if you go in Seller Central, which I'll just open it on another monitor because it'll make it easy so I don't skip anything. When you go down the account health dashboard, you'll see that the very first thing is suspected intellectual property complaints. Those ones sometimes count against you and sometimes don't. But I like to say that they're early warning signs, because typically those show up as suspected IPs if Amazon detects that a rights owner is going and taking down a bunch of infringing content. And if their bots find that your content might be infringing, it's going to show up as a suspected IP. That to me is great, because you'd much rather get a suspected IP that you can deal with than a received IP complaint that might be valid. So suspected IPs, typically you can resolve those either by editing out the trademarked term or deleting the listing if it's, not worth salvaging. Going on from there, there's received intellectual property complaints. Now, those have a couple different flavors. There's copyright complaints, which sellers should never address on their own because those are the least risky when it comes to Amazon and the most risky when it comes to legal risk. So those ones we sideline. When they come in, we handle those completely different than any other claim, because if you just to put it in perspective, like Amazon makes it really easy to click a couple buttons and check some boxes and be guaranteed a reinstatement. But by doing that, you agree that you have to agree to be sued in any United States court. And the rights owner is given a copy of that appeal and all of your contact information and your legal business information, and they're given 10 days to sue you. And if they are correct, the minimum damages start at $750 for every unit you sold. So, yeah,
Grant's eyes just lit up. He said, "Whoa, what?"
Plus attorney's fees. So, so that's why it's like everyone will be like, "Oh, just submit a TMCA counter notice. You don't even need an attorney for it." It's like, yeah, you're right. You don't need an attorney to click those boxes and submit it. But if you're wrong, you will need an attorney when you get sued. And I've had a couple sellers get sued this year for it, where because they were on listings where some other seller maybe created it by stealing images or text from the manufacturer's website, and the manufacturer didn't want their products on Amazon. And Amazon and the deal is, if they sue you within the 10 days, Amazon keeps the listing down. So they weren't looking to get money from the seller per se. They wanted to make sure the listing stayed down. And when the seller forced their hand, they had to sue them, or else the listing would have gone back up.
I did not know that. That is very good information to know. So if you get a copyright infringement, contact you. Yes, don't respond to it. Don't admit guilt. Don't do any of that.
I'm glad my sister is on the call today. I saw her. You know Kimberly, I think, or at least your paralegals do.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, I don't think I've talked to her yet, but she should schedule a call so that way we can chat.
Yeah. She reached out and she's like, "Can I be on this call tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And she's like, "Okay, good, because I want to learn some more stuff." And I'm like, "Perfect."
Nice. Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
So as we're talking about IP complaints and copyright, what are the main types of IP complaints that most sellers normally get, and what are the ones that they should be worried about the most, or at least maybe the most difficult to fight or get retracted?
The least likely to be retracted and most difficult to fight?
Yeah.
Probably patent ones, because usually patent ones go into a whole different territory. Now, the good news for arbitrage sellers, patent ones are usually lobbied against the listing, not the seller. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen one lobbied against the seller, to be quite honest. So patent claims are the hardest ones, because typically if you want to take it on, Amazon has this neutral patent evaluation process that costs $4,000, and they make you go into it in order to fight it. So most sellers don't do it. And also because I've never seen them impact a arbitrage seller, I don't generally recommend sellers do it.
Yeah.
So I was just going to answer this real quick. Adam was saying counterfeit without a test buy. That's not what I was talking about. I was getting to it still, but copyright was what I had mentioned beforehand. Received IP complaints. So there's patents, there's copyrights, then there's trademarks. Everyone probably knows trademarks. Those ones can be lobbied against a seller. Typically it shows up as trademark on product. And that's, someone saying, "Hey, this seller's not authorized to sell this brand, take it down." And then there's trademarks on a product detail page. That one's commonly used by brands in order to get rid of duplicate product pages. Or if they're in the case of like branded bundles that they don't agree with, they'll file it against the branded bundle to get rid of branded bundles that they're not fond of. Last but not least, there's counterfeits, and those can either be counterfeits with a test buy, which show up as either counterfeit or confirmed counterfeit, and then there's counterfeit without a test buy. Confirmed counterfeits generally are fatal. They usually cause the score to go to 0, and you have to get it retracted in order to get it off the account. Or counterfeit without a test buy, those ones are range and in scale of how important they are.
Right. And how would one, so there's confirming with there's counterfeit without a test buy. When somebody wants to get a confirmed counterfeit, they need to do a test buy. What else is needed?
So for you mean for the brands to do it?
Mm-hmm.
So they have to do a test buy, and then they have to file. It's really sad. All they have to do is check a box that says, "Did you do a test buy?" and then upload the order number, and then confirm. Like it'll say, please confirm the seller's information. They'll check yes, and then Amazon will process it as a confirmed counterfeit.
Okay.
And generally, they show up on the dashboard as critical and rather than being worth a point value, they're worth a 100 percentage value, and so it takes the score to 0.
Oh, how often do you see that? Because I don't think I've yet to see a confirmed counterfeit IP complaint come across our account.
You're lucky. It probably would say we see one at least once a month, unfortunately.
Okay.
But they're, if you've got good supply chain, it's not quite as much of a problem because Amazon will sometimes accept the receipts. And we also hit the brands really hard with, hey, you filed a false claim. Don't make us get Amazon's attorneys involved, because we have gotten their attorneys involved in several cases lately and say, this brand is claiming this is counterfeit. I had one of them where the product was acquired at, a big box retail. I was like, clearly this giant store known as Walmart is not going to sell a counterfeit product. And ultimately the brand ends up losing their ability to file IP claims in the future when they do that.
Right.
So
good.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least there's a little bit of backlash for them if they abuse that ability,
Right.
Because I remember it was Morph Beauty. We literally were providing receipts directly from Morph. We're like, how could this not be any more legit? But I think for those, they were actually trademarks. So like our story was we ran it, we had a system for addressing IP complaints, and we kind of ran that. I think what a lot of people do, kind of ran that 6-month window and just said, okay, well, let's be extra careful for the next couple of months in hopes that we don't get another IP complaint because they're starting to stack up. Let's appeal these. And I think we were acknowledging like we messed up, we'll do better. So we were doing everything kind of wrong. And then we hired your firm and learned a whole bunch, which I think is one of the biggest things I tell folks when they come and ask about IP stuff is like, hey, the best thing you can do is go get educated. Go hire Jeff and his team. And like, I promise you, just absorb some content. And you're going to realize that an IP complaint isn't the end of the world. It's serious and it should be addressed, but you shouldn't lose sleep over it. But one of the things was trademark violations. And I learned that, okay, these Morph listings, if I'm not mistaken, these Morph listings were under a different brand. And that's something that we've put in place with our team to try to match up the brands. If the brand is on Amazon is different than the brand on the item, avoid it. Now, of course, sometimes that can be a little easier said than done, because you get some listings that have long history and sell very well, and it's like, this almost feels like I need to have to share this. But what are some simple?
Worth it though.
Not worth it.
No, because they've been suspending people for that, and that's considered, earlier in the year, it was considered a termination offense. Now they've started backing down on it, and they've been reinstating some sellers for it. But it's, and we've been getting them reinstated. But it just depends on how egregious the violation was. So back around October, they suspended 5 sellers, and 4 of them have gotten back up. But one of them, Amazon said, no, we're done. So unfortunately. Because they view it as fraud, because they say, well, you were listing on the wrong brand, and so it's intentionally misbranded.
Right. That is good to know. We changed our, we really, especially with MAC Cosmetics was a big one.
Oh yeah.
And back in like last April, we stopped sharing anything that wasn't a perfect match to the actual, to the official brand one. And I'm so glad we did, because I saw that reckoning that happened in September, October, and I was seeing folks in the chat, and I'm like, whew, I am so happy we didn't share these. But my question would be, what are some easy practical ways that a seller could evaluate a product listing to avoid potential IP risk?
Well, first things first is check the brand. It sounds simple enough, but the title can be perfect, the photos can be perfect, the text can be perfect. The brand is not right and not perfect. For me, it's a no-go, because there's just too much risk. You can get IP claims, or you can get hit with misbranded ASIN. And that's the misbranded ASIN typically comes in the form of a no notice account suspension. So they don't give you 72 hours. They don't give you anything that you wake up to your account has been terminated. So it's just, in that case, it's not worth it because there's just no, there's so much risk compared to the reward that you could make $20. You could also lose your entire account for 6 months. So
right.
Spend
thousands of dollars trying to get it reinstated if you're lucky enough to get it reinstated.
Right.
Yeah.
So
checking brand on the listing.
Yeah, checking brand. The second thing then would be check the titles, check everything else, make sure it's right. If you see anomalies where you're like, normally Tide refers to their products this way, and this is, just not the same, I'd question it. I'd be like, maybe this might not be a real Tide created listing. And then, start really digging deeper. Like for instance, if you see that Tide Pods always have A+ content and you come across a 2-pack of Tide Pods that doesn't have A+ content, that would be a red flag that this listing wasn't authorized by Tide. So
right.
Checking things like A+ content, bullet points for misspellings, just checking just an overall listing quality is really important.
Right.
And if it passes all those tests, then the last thing I would say is check your Keepograph. Because if you see on the Keepograph that it's, every single week it goes from 9 sellers to 1 seller, 9 sellers to 1 seller, 9 sellers to 1 seller.
Right.
That's pretty indicative that they're filing IP complaints against sellers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've nicknamed that a Thanos drop. I think one of our VAs made that up, but it stuck with me.
Nice.
That is a good one. Awesome. Okay, so this is a good question. How many IP complaints are too many? And I know this is kind of a tough question to answer because I'm sure there's tons of variables that go into the mix, but
so it really depends. Every seller account's different. So one thing that's been really nice about having this numeric score is that you can actually see what the impact is on your account when things are happening. But with that being said, not every IP complaint is weighted the same. So like for instance, we had a really interesting case where 2 sellers must have been on a lead list and they bought the same product on the same day from the same store. It went in, probably went to the same prep center. Everything was timelined exactly the same. But one seller started with like a 265 and one seller started with like a 579 as their account health rating. And they both got counterfeit without a test buy claims from the brand on the same day at the same time, minutes apart. The 265 went down by like 10 points and the 579 went down by like 100 points. And you're like, wait, there's no difference. But it just goes to show that they had different investigators assigned, most likely. It probably wasn't the same case investigator. And so one decided to hurt them more than others. So that's when you ask the question, how many is too many? Well, that 579 that drops to a 479, well, if all the rest of theirs are weighted at 100, they could presumably get maybe 4 more, or maybe not, because they might start going up even higher in point value. And for the 200 person, could they get 10 more because they only were charged 10 points? Maybe. But if they start getting assigned 20 and 30 points, they can't. So it's because the magic number to stay above is 100. And since all things are not weighted equally, you just don't know.
And there is no clue as to why that is, why they treat one person differently than the other.
Because they can.
That's usually the answer, right?
I don't know. No, I mean, I was reading through it today actually, because I was trying to make sure I had my numeric values correct on when I was talking about how you get 4 points for every 200 orders. And I was reading through all the FAQs, and it was interesting because it's like points generally, like it has in one of the lines, it says points generally range from 2 points to 8 points per violation, but any point value may be assessed by Amazon as it deems necessary.
So in the end of the day, they control it all.
Yeah, exactly. So
there is a rule of thumb. So what is I'm just curious, and Taylor, hopefully I'm not.
I had a quick fun question because I'm just curious. Sure. What are the most IP complaints on a single account that you've ever seen?
So I worked with a top 10 Amazon seller once, and I realized that it was not worth working with a top 10 Amazon seller because they were just too demanding for 89, even though everyone pays the same price, but they basically they'd file an IP claim, and then they're paying the same $89 everyone else is, and then they'd email me immediately and say, we just submitted this, we expect this to be worked on within 3 hours. I was like, okay, like, well, they're like, and then they'd always be like, top 10 Amazon seller cannot go down. I'm like, okay, great. Like, but, and then I looked in, they really did. They made $1 million a day. But they, yeah. And so then, and they had like probably 200 IP claims. So they were the most that I've ever seen. But I mean, they also had, the volume to support that number of IP claims. So,
and that's what I was kind of curious about, because I don't know if I think this is just kind of sellers talking and assuming and kind of saying, well, this is my experience and this is your experience, and kind of coming up with an idea. But I was always under the assumption that the more you sell, the more IP complaints that, you could get without necessarily reaching to suspension. So if a newer seller gets an IP complaint, that can be devastating. Somebody who's selling 7 figures a year, if they have 2 or 3 IP complaints, it's not, the end of the world. I say that as a 7-figure seller who currently has 3 IP complaints, and just so happened I would get one today out of all days. I haven't gotten one in like almost like 4 months. And then just, sure enough, today when I'm interviewing you.
Here, let me send you one of the forms real quick. There, that way. If you
Kimberly, can you get that?
There, we have plenty. Should be in your email.
Perfect.
So, okay, sure, I got it. Never mind. So, thank you. So it is sort of like the more you get, the more you can sustain. But certain ones, even like even a huge seller, the very first day that they rolled out the account health assurance program, the largest seller I work with, he received an IP, and he's not the top 10 seller, but he's just someone I worked with for years. He received a confirmed counterfeit with a test buy. And they emailed him that very same day, in the morning he'd received, welcome to account health assurance. You're now protected against suspensions. And then by 7:00 at night, and I remember this because we were having a team meeting at a local Mexican restaurant, and we were supposed to have team building activities that night. And we get this frantic call from the client saying, I just got, a notice that my account's going to be suspended because it's confirmed counterfeit. And so he sends it over. And it's interesting because it says, greetings from Amazon's account health assurance team. Your account will not be deactivated while we work with you to address this issue, provided that you resolve the IP complaint in 72 hours. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because back in the day, it was greetings from account health. You have 72 hours to give us a plan of action or your account will be suspended. So what changed? Nothing. It's just, lipstick and different, slightly nicer wording. That's so so it's the exact same thing. And so that, it said, resolve it within 72 hours or you'll be suspended. And so we immediately, we got back, instead of 2 margaritas, we went to just one, went back to the office and started working on it. Ended up it was interesting. Like, the only thing I'll say about that case is that when you're bigger, they seem to respond faster, but it doesn't prevent you from being suspended, because he did get suspended for a couple hours and then he got his account back. And then, because we got the IP claim resolved. So just everything was fast tracked in terms of their review. Like, we submit an appeal, they'd respond within like 20 to 30 minutes. Okay. That's about the only difference. But he was still, not above the law.
Can I ask what kind of volume that particular seller was sort of around when that happened?
$1 million a month. So
$1 million a month. Wow. Yeah. Very interesting.
So they just, they just try, they're still, subject to the same rules,
Yeah. I have a kind of a question that's in this category, but sort of different. Sure. When I was in high school, I would get this, fortunately for me, and I'm only thinking of this because I gave my testimony at a retreat this weekend, but and it came up in my mind. But I used to get this stack of letters from colleges saying, hey, we'd like you to consider playing at our school. Well, that's now changed as an Amazon seller. I have a stack of Voorhees letters, and it's bigger, far bigger than the stack of letters from colleges.
Yeah.
I think that was Grant's subtle way of saying I used to be really good at football.
I picked up on it. I figured out what he was talking about, especially with all the NFL balls in the back on the pictures.
Oh yeah, I got the boys there. Actually, Taylor, I'm practicing your interview tip that you told me. You got to kind of prelude into the question, right? So I was kind of doing the thing. So Voorhees letters, like, you know, I know what my attitude is towards them. And, but I'm curious, and you're in a very different position. What's your professional opinion of what a seller should and should not do if they get a Voorhees letter? How threatening are they really? What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I know this probably sounds self-interested, but I always tell our clients, send them over to us because we can review them quickly and see if there's an anomaly. So, like, for instance, back a couple Christmases ago, I had an interesting Voorhees situation where seller posted in one of the seller like Facebook groups. They're like, "Oh, I just got a letter from Voorhees. Like, what should I do with it?" And they just had a picture of the envelope, and everyone's like, "Burn it, you know, put it, you know, light it when you light the Christmas tree on fire," like all this sort of stuff, you know, like of what to do with this letter. And
Right.
you know, among the other stuff, you know, toilet paper, everything else that they come up with. And then of course I just, you know, reached out. I was like, "Hey, you know," because I knew he was one of my clients. I was like, "Hey, why don't you just send it over? Let's take a look at it." And so he does. He sends it over, and the first thing when I open it is it says, the very first line, it says, you know, "Dear so and so, we did a test buy of your products and determined they're counterfeit." I was like, "Whoa, that's definitely not normal language," you know. And so it very quickly escalated from a situation where he thought that it was a standard Voorhees letter to that just he was just going to, you know, set on fire, to we need to figure more out about this. And when we started doing more due diligence, it was a supplier he'd never used before, somebody who claimed that they were a wholesaler, that claimed they bought direct from the brand. Well, I don't know what brand it was, but I know what brand it was. It was actually one of the brands I used to sell, which was even more funny, like the whole situation, how it came full circle. It was one of the pet shampoos actually. And you know, and I asked him, "Well, where did this all stuff come in from?" He goes, "Well, they came in, you had to get imported. It came by DHL. I was like, "Wait, what? That doesn't make sense. That product's made in Texas. No one's shipping anything DHL from Texas. I mean, not these days, at least." So he was like, "Oh, well, I thought it was import." You know, it was just wholesale, right? He didn't know anything about the product. So he was like, he thought it was legit. No, it turned out it was really all counterfeit product that he'd bought. And so if he would have kept selling the product after getting that letter, he would have been knowingly selling counterfeit products into the market. So not only would he probably have lost his Amazon account because Voorhees hadn't made a counterfeit complaint to Amazon yet, but he also would have been on the hook for the damages of selling a case or a pallet, of counterfeit pet shampoo. And so we were able to negotiate that situation out so that he avoided legal liability. And he was actually able to do a chargeback with his credit card company and get his money back. And the wholesaler who sold it to him is who Voorhees ended up suing. And because we facilitated the exchange of all that information and all the product samples to Voorhees, they gave him basically immunity from the situation. So that doesn't happen often, but you know, stuff can happen. And every once in a while we see Voorhees letters that are anomalous to what we would expect. And that's when we step in and say, "Hey, this could indicate that they're preparing a lawsuit against you, or there's something going on here that we need to address." Because, you know, the worst situation, like I have another seller case that I'd worked on earlier this year. They received 2 K&L Gates letters. Everyone told them just to throw them away, and then the second one they didn't even sign for, because people said, "Oh, if you don't sign for the certified mail, they can't show that they got it to you." Well, they didn't want to be ignored, so they just filed a federal case against the person and had him served by the sheriff. And then it went from being hey, let's negotiate something here, because the seller was actually, you know, there was issues with what was going on. It went from going, "Hey, let's negotiate a settlement casually," to, "Hey, let's you know, spend thousands of dollars filing court papers and trying to negotiate a settlement at the same time."
So don't trust everything you see on a Facebook group or that somebody comments. Get an expert's advice, right? And with those Warrior letters, guys, don't just toss them in the trash. Maybe send them off to Jeff. Jeff,
Yeah.
we can touch on this again later too, but how could somebody who doesn't know you or doesn't have representation, how can they find you and how
So,
can they get connected? And can you
yeah.
talk a little bit about what you offer? Because I like your package and it just makes sense to me, but I'm going to let you speak onto that.
Yeah. So we offer a monthly retainer for sellers. It's $89 a month right now, although I'll tell people in June we're launching a new website. It's going to go up to $99 a month. So, lock in now, and that way you'll stay at the $89. But it basically covers you against any of the account health issues that come up. It's jeffschick.com. And when you sign up, you're protected against suspensions from day one. So I've actually literally had it happen. When I was in Australia for a seller event a couple months ago, I had just landed. I was jet lagged as heck, and I was like about to go to sleep, and someone texted me and said, "I just got suspended." And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "And I signed up 30 minutes ago." I was like, and of course the bullshit meter is a little bit going off. I'm like, oh, that's just like
Right.
really convenient, right? But sure enough, it time stamped. They signed up at 8:01 a.m. and got the notice from Amazon at 8:31. Like, it was really, they got lucky. So we wrote the appeal and got them reinstated by the end of the day, and it was all good. That worked out well for them, and they had only paid $89. So it covers the IP claims, it covers consultations with lawyers, it covers anything that happens on that account health dashboard is pretty much covered. The only exception to that for private label sellers is product recalls, and we don't arbitrage sellers don't have to worry about product recalls, thankfully.
I gotta say, Jeff, your rate is like, it's almost too good to be true, and I think you know that. In the past, I paid thousands of dollars to have an account suspension reinstated, and then thousands more to have coverage, and some account health account review kind of report once a month, and it was expensive. And then I think we found your site. I think you were associated elsewhere at one point, and then we found your site. We're like, whoa, what the heck? And I remember seeing the $89, and I was like, there's no way that he's doing all this for $89. But it's true. Like, how big of a team do you have? How many staff are working with you to get all this stuff done? Because I have to imagine there's quite a few reps every day.
So it's myself, and then one full-time paralegal, and then we have another team that we just conducted interviews for yesterday that's coming on board. It's going to be 3 more people. So by the end of June, we should have 5 people on the team, and those 3 people all used to work at Amazon and Seller Performance. So
nice.
Perfect.
Good stuff. Okay.
So if what's your average turnaround time when someone does file get an IP complaint against them and then reaches out to your team?
Our SLA is 5 days, although that's like the stated SLA of like when it goes into the red zone on our software. But we try to handle them within 2 days. And with the new team coming on board, this should be, there's no by almost tripling our team, we should be able to handle them in less than 2 days, I would assume. So
yeah.
Well, I can tell you, we had gotten into a rhythm of trying to handle our own claim appeals and stuff like that. And I think in one there's a lot of things I've learned on this call, and I think that my sister has learned was one, like, certain appeals aren't as high a priority as others, so let's focus on the ones that are high priority. You guys, it seems like where we because again, we're busy as sellers and business owners. Like, we don't want to try to reach out to brands and ask for retractions and stuff, but we found that that's one of those things you guys will usually hit on first, and can often result in getting it retracted before we even have to appeal, and stuff like that. It's been great. And so we got into a rhythm where we were doing our own claims, but we started to kind of like, it wasn't working anymore. It stopped working. What we were doing, our model, our little success model wasn't working anymore. So I have to imagine there's a certain level of you guys having to kind of turn it over, figure out like what language does Amazon want to hear now as compared to 6 months ago.
What's interesting now is that we're noticing is that, well, one, the reaching out to the rights owners and retractions still remains, number one for us at getting stuff done. But then number two, it's when we do have to deal with Amazon, depending on the claim, we triage it. And so if it's like a IP claim that's not resulted in any harm to the account, and it's just minimal, and like say 20 points out of 500, then we're going to fight it at the seller performance level and try to get that off. But if it's a, for instance, a IP claim and someone is now dropped from, 200 to 150, then we may get Amazon's attorneys involved, especially if there's evidence showing foul play. So that's where we've really started changing things up, and where the model is starting to change a lot more is that, getting Amazon's attorneys involved to let them know that there's wrongdoing, and being like, okay, the ball's in your court. Like, for instance, we had one IP claim recently that I worked on. When I started looking at it, I was like, this is not even, they don't even have a trademark yet. The trademark was filed, but it's not been granted by the Patent and Trademark Office. Like, there's no reason that they should have been allowed to file an IP claim. And, reached out to Amazon's attorneys, got them involved. And, I mean, it's none of our business. I don't really care what happens, but I do know that the other seller that filed that IP claim is no longer a seller on Amazon. And I don't think they should be, because they, if you're abusing the brand registry process and hurting people, it's not the right platform for that. So
You're here. Yeah. One of the things that we, noticed too is when we were reaching out on our own to the brand owners, we would almost never get a response. It was very difficult to ever hear back from them. But when we hired your guys' firm, the response rate is so much more, because it's not, and I think, of course, it's not, Joe Blow Schmo. It's, hey, here's our representative, reaching out. So yeah, I think, that alone is like, that just makes sense. You have somebody who can make contact with these brand owners and figure out this before it ever gets an Amazon involved. But also, I love that you're also getting Amazon involved when there's somebody abusing that system, because and correct me if I'm wrong here, you'd have a better, I feel like, just feeling wise, I feel like IP complaints aren't coming in nearly as much as they were, say, a year and a half to 2 years ago. And maybe that's Amazon cracking down a little bit, or is that just me being wrong? Or we're just smarter than you?
I don't want to say that you're wrong, but I will say that we get several IP claims a day sent to us that we're still working on. Probably, if I had to guess, I mean, I think we're probably at least 200 to 300 a month at this point. So it's quite a bit. So, and it's just like, it's all shapes and sizes. Like, it's, majority are still counterfeit. There's a lot of trademark ones mixed in there, but it's kind of all over the board, big brands, little brands. A lot of the big brands aren't doing it quite as much, though. I mean, I'd say it's mostly mid-size and smaller brands that do it now, because big brands are realizing, like the best. I don't know if you've heard my story. I've told it a couple times of I had a marketing intern at one of these huge conglomerates. It wasn't Procter and Gamble, but imagine it's that size. And they filed a bunch of counterfeit claims against sellers. And we had like 4 sellers affected. I think they were all on a leads list. And so they were all, they all got the same IP claim. And I reached out to this marketing intern. I didn't know it was an intern at the time, but I reached out. I was like, our standard letter, sends it to him. And the person just writes back and is like, and, like really smugly just says, this is between you and Amazon. We will not entertain this further. And I was like, really now? And then it said, like marketing intern, like assistant marketing intern or whatever, for this brand. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I was like, and I said, well, with all due respect, it's between us and you, because you're filing false complaints and you're the one that filed them. And so we need to, it needs to be resolved. And the kid was just like, you can go find another ambulance to chase. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, so I just was like, well, I don't really think that this is what this brand stands for. I didn't know that they operated that way, but I'm not saying this to him. So I went and found one of the attorneys that works there. And I reached out to him. I said, I'm not sure if you're aware of what this marketing intern is doing and saying, but I think it would be interesting for you to know, because I did ask him to forward this to the legal department since it is a legal matter. And he's told me to find another ambulance to chase. So the attorney was pretty horrified when he called me on the phone, and he goes, I can't believe that this happened. He goes, they should have run this by our legal team. We would have never approved them to file false counterfeits. He goes, how many sellers are affected? I said, I think we've got like 4 or 5. And he goes, okay, I need all that information. He's like, we'll make sure that this gets retracted by the end of the day. And at that point, we got a letter back from the marketing manager, not the intern, saying these have all been retracted and we apologize for the inconvenience. So You know, it's interesting.
It's stories like that just, I mean, if anybody's watching this call live or the recording, it's stories like that where I'm sitting here going, I'm a fool if I don't hire someone like Jeff Schick to represent me on Amazon as a reseller. I'm just not doing it right. You know, it's and God bless you for providing a service for such a fair price. I mean,
well, you know what happened to me is that when I was in law school, I had these sort of issues come up, and I remember paying, one lawyer, because my law professor made me do all this research about the Voorhees letter. But then I was like, well, what's the answer? He goes, well, that you have to hire a lawyer for. He's like, and I can't be your lawyer because I'm your professor, and I have to be able to unbiased, grade your papers. So I had to go hire a lawyer, and he charged me $1,500 to review the Voorhees letter. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like $1,500 to research and review this. Okay. And then I had a suspension. It was like $3,000, and like all this stuff just started happening. And I was just like, how, and I was lucky. We were making $300,000 a month. So we could afford that. Right. But I'm like, thinking to myself, I'm like, but we didn't want to afford it, like still was a waste of money. Right. I mean, relatively speaking. So I'm like, how could another seller who doesn't make, who's just starting out, they'd never be able to afford it. And that's why we tried to make it affordable, because what I realized is that when you need a lawyer, you need them. But you're not going to need a lawyer every single month. And that's why the model works. That's why people ask, like, oh, can I just sign up when I need you and then sign off and then sign back up? I'm like, well, no, because then we'd have to charge you the full price of what it would be, because the model doesn't work that way. So
just to clarify. Well, just to clarify, because I have a question in the chat. So $89 a month to be for the retainer plan. Is there any additional fees for each claim worked on?
No, there's not. So I like to say it covers, any of the stuff that, any of the ASIN suspensions, account suspensions, IP claims, all that stuff's covered. Things you can't control are all included. And then things that you can control, like if you want a trademark or an LLC or, anything like your contracts to be written, things like that, that's all done, at a, affordable rates, flat, typically fixed fees. But everything else is covered, on the retainer for the $89.
I see. Wow. Man, what a great deal, guys. Well, first off, Jeff, thank you so much. We're at the top of our hour. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Go check out Jeff at jeffschick.com. Grant, do you mind throwing the link back in the chat one more time?
And that is JEFFSCHICK.com.
Yes, that's right. Like the razor, although I don't get any royalties, but I do get cut letters from them every once in a while.
But guys, you guys would, you spend money on your repricing software, you spend money on your Amazon calculators. There's software, tools that every Amazon seller needs. I would implore you also need to have representation. Okay. $89 a month is a small price to pay for the amount of money it can save you down the long run. Also, the education is a huge plus that comes along with it. Jeff, again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Anytime, the education for me is fun. I love talking about this sort of stuff with sellers. So anytime you guys want to have me back on, let me know.
Will do. Real quick before you go, I want to give away a couple of t-shirts to everyone who is live on the call. So Grant, I need a number from 1 through 28, and Jeff, I need a number from 1 through 28 from you as well.
All right. Okay.
Ready for it whenever you guys.
11.
What was that?
21.
11 and 21. So Jason Richmond, congratulations, Jason Richmond. You get an OA Cheddar t-shirt. If you want to go ahead and just email us at team@oacheddar.com and let Cindy know your shirt size and your address, and she will get that sent out to you. And then one more. Unfortunately, I'm counting these, so this might take a second.
Jeff, we usually do a little bit of an after show.
Good.
Manukum, if you also get a OA Cheddar t-shirt. So please email us at team@oacheddar.com with your t-shirt size and your address, and Cindy will get one sent over to you.
All right. And
Awesome.
and also, Jason, I'll sweeten that deal a little bit more. I'll do a giveaway. You get 50% off for the next 2 months on your bill. So we'll get that applied for you.
Nice. Awesome. Look at that. It pays off to show up live for these calls.
Oh, shout
All
out.
right. For all those who are on the recording, thank you so much for joining. We will see you guys all on the next one. Y'all have a good rest of your day.
Y'all too. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.